I was looking the other day at our homepage for 247sports.com because I am in our Slack rooms. Most of you know what Slack is. If you don't, it's just basically a way to communicate with your entire company. And a lot of little individual chat rooms on there. So, we have one for recruiting, we have one for podcasting, we have the national channels, we have team channels, anything and everything you could ever want. I'm not giving you the password, though, but just know they exist. And so in our editorial meeting the other day, and then subsequently in that chat room, I saw our Chris Hummer, who's done a lot of really good work lately. I saw him throwing together some things to watch for in the future of college football, the immediate and then midterm future of college football. And I said, that looks like it's going to be pretty good. Let me remember that and come back when he actually publishes it. So I did. He published it. I think even right now it's still on the front page. If it's not, you can find it if you scroll down. But on the front page there of 247sports.com, Chris Hummer did a really good job. And it came at this from a lot of different angles. Like I told you, I know the lower third really says rapid reaction, but we're kind of reacting to what this is going to do in the future. Anyone can sit here and just talk about how they can't believe what's happened so far. Well, I think you come to this program for a little more than that. So let's avoid the emotion. And let's dive a little bit deeper here, as Chris Hummer did. And I wanted to kind of read some of the highlights that I took away from this and then dive into it a little bit further. The first question that I think is on a lot of minds right now, including the ones watching this show, is playing in the spring, which, the Big Ten says they're going to try and do, Pac-12 says they're going to try and do. How feasible is that? I've done radio hits in 4 or 5 time zones the last 2 days. I was on in Honolulu for the first time. I didn't tell you that, Colin. Charleston to Honolulu yesterday, a lot of places today, and everyone wants to know the same thing. Could they really play in spring? Well, I guess they could, but as optimistic as I have been and try to continue to be about having football in the fall, I am that much more cynical and jaded towards the concept of spring football. And I'm going to tell you why. Well, I think the reasons are obvious, but let me give you an additional reason why. I couldn't care less how forceful the language has been from the Big Ten. I don't care how resolved they seem to this concept. This is, again, the same league office who delivered me a schedule and then postponed their season 6 days later. So if they're able to turn on that short a dime, then imagine what they could do with 5 months to go until it's time to really do anything. So I really don't think that we're going to see it. And I don't even believe that a lot of folks who are pitching the ideas believe that we're going to see it. I guess we could see it. Selfishly, of course, I'll be rooting for it to happen. Now, don't think for a second I don't want to see it happen. I'm not one of these folks out there that you're ever going to accuse of rooting against the season happen. I can assure you of that. But I think there are many reasons to be less than optimistic about that. Having said that, what in the world does it do to the 2021 fall season if you do have a spring season? This is where things could become a mess. Let me give you actually several ways here that I'm going to talk about where things could get a whole lot muddier and sticky even than they already are. If you have 3 Power 5 conferences, let's say, that go ahead and get a fall season in, and then you've got 2 Power 5s or just even one of them, who attempt to and successfully do pull off a spring season, what does fall of 2021 look like? Because I can tell you confidently, the ACC, if they get an entire fall season in right now, are going to be business as usual for the entirety of 2021, up to and including the regular season. But if the Big Ten ends up playing spring ball, first off, they're not going to play 12 games in the spring, and I can also assure you they're not going to play a full 12-game season in the fall. And so if we were to hit the fast-forward button a year from now, hopefully virus talk is a thing of the past, probably still cognizant of it, but hopefully it's a little bit more in our rear view to where it's not impacting the season happening or not. You're going to have some folks sitting there on the bench saying, we didn't postpone our season last year. We got an entire season in. We're going to play our full 12 games. And then you may have some other folks in there saying, we're going to play 9 or 10 of them maybe. And then you're going to have the natural question, which we may very well be sitting at this desk asking this next year, how do you marry up some teams from conferences that only play 9 or 10 games with teams from other conferences that play 12 games? If you don't put yourself in that vulnerable position to lose games as much as some of these other teams are, how do we equally weigh that? How does the college football playoff and the bowl picture, how does that work in 2021? Very interesting to note. Also, your scholarship limits are going to have to be changed. You've got an 85-25 right now. You got an 85-man scholarship limit, and then you got the 25 per year that you can sign. And there's some ways to slightly fudge these numbers, but those are the pretty hard in stone written numbers right now. Well, if you have a spring season, and you also maintain the eligibility for guys that wanted to opt out and all that, then you certainly, when accounting for early enrollees too, you're going to have to extend the 85-man scholarship limit for anyone who's playing spring football. And when I say spring ball, I mean an actual football season in the spring. So if eligibility is extended for people who opt out, meaning they're still eligible a year longer than you thought they were going to be, and if your early enrollees are on campus by the time your season starts, which they would be if you had a spring season, are you going to extend your scholarship limits to 110? Is that how that's going to happen? And that would last into the fall. And let me tell you where it really gets muddy. No one cares about it in the spring. But Chris Hummer makes a good point in his piece here. Auburn is supposed to play Penn State next year. That's one to look forward to. Do you honestly think that the SEC League Office or Gus Malzahn is going to look at his 85-man roster and just be ready, willing, and able to play against teams with 110-man rosters and have no problem with that? If you do, then that makes one of us, because I really don't think that. Speaking of early enrollees, there is potentially a massive loophole here that you could take advantage of if you do end up playing spring football. I want you to just think about this. It's very simple to understand. If you are James Franklin at Penn State, if you're Ryan Day, if you're Jim Harbaugh, and you've got a situation where your season doesn't start until January, let's say, you could have 2 years that you get from a player, 2 seasons that you get from a player using up 1 year of eligibility, if that is indeed the way that works. Because you arrive, especially if you arrive in January, we can kind of compound matters a little bit more here. What if I arrive in January as an early enrollee, and I'm a 5-star kid, I'm a kid who is ready to contribute. Well, normally what you're looking at is for these teams who are going to play for a national championship, their early enrollees arrive and they participate in playoff practice and national championship practice. They're not going to play in the game, but it's just a nice way to get them a little bit of early acclimation to the way that things work in that program. Well, if you're having a spring season, your early enrollees, theoretically, are going to be able to arrive on campus and be eligible to play the entire season. Never seen that before. And then the last one, which is kind of a morbid way to end this whole thing, is surviving the financial impact. There is no easy way to answer this. A lot of programs aren't going to be able to. I'm not just talking about football. I mean athletic departments. A lot of them are going to have to close the doors. You got the Pac-12 openly talking about bailouts and loans and leveraging their future TV deal as collateral to take out loans and whatnot. But there's no easy way to answer that. I mean, unless you have some very philanthropic billionaires who just decide to come to the table and say, I think we're going to rename the Sun Belt Conference after me in exchange for me bailing you guys out. I don't really know how that's going to work, but I don't know how many futures are going to be affected because we really still ultimately don't know how this season even plays out. Kind of fascinating, kind of sad, kind of interesting. Wish we could fast forward 10 years and just be reading the history book on it, though.